Hi, good evening. My name is Rakaya Aslan. I'm a lecturer at UCL IEDE, and welcome to this lecture, which is part of the IEDELearn series. We're starting a little bit late today to allow people to come, and then we'll let people come in as they arrive. So today's talk is energy efficiency at the home. What's the hold-up? And it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker today, Sebs Junemann, who I've had the pleasure to work with on various projects. Sebs is a freelance research consultant with a background in socio-technical energy research projects. He previously led the energy and environment team at NatCen, and he worked on the national evaluation of the Renewable Heat Incentive for DECC. I've worked on several projects with him, including the ETI's Consumer Response and Behaviour project and the ETI Thermal Efficiency project as well. So I'll hand over to Seb. I think the talk's going to last for about 45 minutes, and then after that we'll have time for questions, followed by refreshments on the first floor.
Thank you. I'm going to have to sort of crane my head around. I think the computer needs to be connected to a projector there, so do excuse me from doing this every now and then, just to make sure I know where I am in my slides. Just in terms of the agenda for the talk, the first thing we'll do is just tell you a bit about myself, just expanding a bit on what Rakaya said. Then a brief summary on why do we need energy efficiency, why is it a problem we need to solve. Then get into the sort of the meat of the presentation, so why do we have certainly low demand at the moment. And then finish up with a bit of what can we do to overcome this, some suggestions and maybe some ideas, and finish up with the Q&A. So, who am I? I started my career as a physicist, and so I'm a physicist by training, but I am now a sort of social researcher by experience. And so my journey started off doing physics. There's a picture there that says that physics is theoretical, but fun is real. It's so much fun doing physics that I decided to not do physics for a job when I graduated. Moved into housing. I worked for Uptake Housing and Care, which is a small RSL in London, where I worked on their energy efficiency programs and so fuel poverty, insulation, and things like that. I actually found it really rewarding, doing lots of engagement with tenants on the fuel poverty side of things. And then a couple of years after that, went back to Imperial to do an MSc in environmental technology, which I actually did find really fun. So after that, I took the sustainability experience and environmental stuff that I've been doing, went back into housing again, worked for Metropolitan Housing for a while, and then worked for Peabody. Peabody are London-based landlord again. And while I was at Peabody, I started working on projects with the ETI and Power and Touch and other members of the team here. That bit of work was looking at retrofits and looking at how consumers might value or disvalue it, so coming up with value propositions for people. I led the consumer research side of that, and after that worked on another ETI project at PRP, where this was entirely focused on consumer response and behaviour. Many of you may be aware of it. The report from ETI came out today, so this is a very timely presentation. If you're interested, ask me at the end and I'll point you towards it. After working on that project, I had a brief stint at NatCen Social Research, where, as I said, I led the energy and environment team, working on various things like evaluation, such as for the Renewable Heat Incentive for DECC. My specialism is mainly on the qualitative side of things, but I have experience on the quantitative side of things as well. Brief stint at NatCen before I decided to go freelance. That at the bottom is what Google Images says a freelancer looks like. It's all about laptops and hammocks, apparently, if only that were the case. The other thing I did in the last few years, I set up a startup called Homely, and this is something which I did with a friend of mine from my MSc in environmental technology at Imperial. We both were interested in fuel poverty and improving energy efficiency and kind of catalysing the sort of take-up of energy efficiency measures in this country. So we set up Homely as a startup to act as a middleman between homeowners and businesses that provide energy efficiency services. The general idea behind Homely was to connect people with other people who have done the work, so that they can have sort of warts and all stories from people who have installed energy efficiency measures, and also put them in touch with local trades who could be trusted to do the work. Unfortunately, I had to close this business. We had to close this business in January of this year, partly, as we'll talk about in the rest of the presentation, because of the low demand demand for energy efficiency in this country, and so we couldn't rapidly turn around profit enough to keep me in full-time employment doing that. And also because I had a wedding to pay for, which we did in August of this year, so who knows, I might be able to go back into the startup world now I'm a freelancer. So that's all really to say that I spent most of my career really working on talking to people about buildings and energy systems and how they interact with them, what they think of them, what they think of their existing ones, and what they think of super energy efficient ones for those who have actually invested in them. So the problem, energy efficiency in the UK is one of the worst really in Europe. We have some of the worst housing stock. You see from that image, also red from the walls, the solid wall properties, and something which means that fuel bills are higher than they need to be, homes get colder than they should be, and just to put that into perspective, looking at your average home in the UK, it uses as much energy as 2 homes on average in Sweden, which is a Scandinavian colder country. So they're getting something right, we're not quite getting there. We have an older stock, which is in dire need of energy efficiency improvements. Looking at EPC data, this is the most up-to-date EPC data from CLG. I just plotted this on a graph to really show the number of lodged EPCs at A, B, C, D, F, and G ratings. Hopefully you're familiar with EPCs, the idea behind them being they give a measure of the theoretical energy performance of the dwelling. I was having a chat with Taj before the presentation about some of the shortcomings of EPCs, but it still highlights this graph that actually where we're at is we're at sort of the D, E's and F's, far too many homes are there, we need to be pushing them up into the green. The Hills Review in 2011, Professor John Hills, one of his concluding remarks was, it is now recognised that before the end of the decade, something like a revolution in our housing stock is required to address this energy inefficiency that's been a factor of life for too long, which I thought was a really nice way of summing up the problem. So we are now over halfway through the decade, and let's have a quick chat about how that revolution is going. I think probably the best way to encapsulate where we're at with the housing revolution is to look at the Green Deal now. For those of you who are not familiar with the Green Deal, it was a scheme put forward by government to overcome one of the major obstacles to people investing in energy efficiency measures, which is the upfront cost. The idea being that Green Deal finance would be provided to pay for the installation, and you would then pay that back through energy bills. That's how many people actually took up the Green Deal. A very, very small number compared to the millions of people that actually need more millions of homes that we need to be retrofitting. So much so that, as you probably know, in July, the Green Deal was thrown in the bin by the government, and they said that they hoped that the private sector would hopefully pick up the slack, and that we would find a different way to retrofit all of our homes. I think what worried a lot of people in the industry was the fact that it was canned without any kind of replacement announced. So much so that it's left a lot of people in the retrofit industry feeling a bit puzzled and a bit sort of bewildered and not really knowing what to do. So the Green Deal had problems. I could probably do another talk entirely about the Green Deal and some of the problems, well, many of the problems that it had. Things like the interest rate being a major problem. However, the real issue is that ultimately people aren't demanding for energy efficiency measures. It was only going to be overcoming the initial barrier of upfront costs, but even with that, people don't seem to want it. So we're going to look at the reasons why for that in the next few slides. Just a disclaimer on what's coming next. This is based on my experience of talking to people over the last few years, working in the sector for the last few years, not necessarily what the government papers might say or what other people might say, so I'd be really interested to hear your views in the Q&A and also looking into later. So 3 reasons I'm going to cover as to why I think we might have low demand. The first issue that I think we've got is that people really struggle to identify and see the value in energy efficiency. Common things that people will say when asked why aren't you buying energy efficiency measures? Why are you investing in solar wall insulation? Why are you investing in a new greener heating system? People say it's too expensive, or I can't afford it, or I shouldn't have to pay for it. Now, interestingly, the first two might sound the same, but actually there's a subtle difference which is quite important there. It's too expensive suggests that the measure itself has got too much money associated with it, but the I can't afford it suggests to me that it's more about people saying I don't necessarily value it enough to make that investment in it. And the I shouldn't have to pay for it one we'll come back to later. Part or parcel of this is that energy efficiency measures for quite a while now, with schemes like carbon emissions reduction target, eco, warm front, have been advertised as free to everyone. So free of the warm insulation for everyone, limited time offer. People have become used to the idea that energy efficiency measures are things that are provided for free. And while that has seen lots and lots of installations of these sorts of things, what it has done, which I think it has done, as was put into a report back in Junemann Focus a couple of years ago, was devalue these measures to suggest to people that these are things which should be given away for free, that they aren't really worth money. So people then also think about payback. Quite often, when you ask people about energy efficiency measures, they get into their little accountant mode. They'll start to say, well, how much is that going to save me on my energy bills? And then say, right, how much does that cost me up front? And they do this payback calculation, and they say, well, 25 years is a long time. I may not be in this house in 25 years, so I'm going to end up worse off if I invest in this. There's not good enough reason for me to do this in terms of just the money side of things. Which is weird because when people invest in other things in their home, they don't really think about it in terms of the payback. I mean, this here is an example. Imagine if we talked about energy efficiency the same way we talk about kitchens, or talk about kitchens the same way we talk about energy efficiency. People will invest in things in their home that doesn't have a material payback necessarily, unless you count potential increase in home value. People will invest in for other reasons. In the case of kitchens, quite often when you talk to people, it's because it's something that they find improves their sort of social standing, it's something that they can boast about to other people, and also makes them feel nice using that kitchen. They get pleasure out of using it. So why is it that energy efficiency measures are constantly pushed as money saving, and pretty much only money saving? The only other thing that really people talk about when they talk about energy efficiency in terms of marketing is how green it can be. So it's, you're talking about saving the planet or saving money. And if those are the two things that are really being pushed towards people, they aren't seeing any other benefits in doing these kind of improvements to their home. Which leads us back to this idea that energy efficiency is something which should be paid for by someone else. In this case, a really common thing that people have said to me in conversations about this is the government should pay for it. Particularly if you're thinking about carbon targets, thinking that government should be the one dealing with the energy saving. I shouldn't have to deal with it. What I find slightly perplexing about this is that ultimately, if the government pays for it, we pay for it through taxes, through any other kind of mechanism. The government is not something that creates money or has money all by itself. So if the government should pay for it, ultimately we are going to end up paying for it ourselves. And also, when you think about it in terms of increasing taxes to pay for energy efficiency measures, everything you see in the press quite often is really negative when you talk about the green taxes that are put on energy bills. So people don't seem to actually like it when that's the reality of that statement really kicks in. Which brings us on to number 2, understanding of measures. So looking at how people understand energy efficiency measures, but also understand what they've currently got. The first thing that people find is if you ask them what they would like to do to their home, they really get confused between all the different sort of things that are out there. There's a myriad of measures. People find the information they get often conflicting from different sources, points them in multiple different directions. one-size-fits-all solution for all homes. This whole square peg, round hole situation. So they don't always know what is best for them, and quite often that is a big barrier to them making that leap into action. The second area of lack of understanding comes in when you consider people's existing systems. So the main sort of heating controls that we've got in our homes at the moment in the UK, you've got thermostats and you've got timers, very often integrated together. Your typical thermostat on the wall with your dial that turns up and down. Very often when you talk to people about how to use it, they understand how to operate it. They understand that you turn it one way and it goes up, you turn it down and it goes down, but they think about it in terms of a volume switch or like a gas burner. The idea being, if I turn it up to 30, the house will get hotter quicker, which is not the way that a thermostat works. The idea being that you should really just set it to the temperature that you want and let the thermostat do the regulation of the system for you. So they understand how it works, but they understand how to operate it, but they don't understand what it does. Timer's almost the other way around. Quite often people understand what a timer does, that it will turn the heating on at a certain time or hot water on at a certain time, turn it off at another. But very often, when confronted with a timer like that with lots of different buttons on it, they won't be able to use it just from interfacing with it directly. Very often they will say that they need to dig out the manual for it. And very often the manual is stuffed somewhere in that drawer of bits and pieces, probably underneath various coupons and energy bills and things like that. So they know where the manual might be, and you say, well, would you ever consider digging that manual out and figuring out how to use your timer? But very often they just say, do you know what, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. For most people, their heating systems do the job that they want them to do. They will keep them warm when they need to, provide hot water, and even though it's not really giving them the best sort of optimized system performance, they aren't really that fussed about it. The only area that this fails is actually when it does break down. So when a heating system does break down, more often than not, people get thrown into sudden crisis mode and immediately find that their heating system is the most important thing to them, when the day before, when it was working, it was absolutely fine and it wasn't something they were really thinking about at all. And at that particular moment, when it breaks and they're confronted with a decision of what to replace it with, they're more likely to rely on familiar technologies to them, replacing like for like. So doing any kind of research or reviewing into potential other technologies, things like heat pumps, doesn't really occur to them because they want to get their heating back and their hot water back as soon as they possibly can. Which brings us on to the third of the three main things that I think are promoting this lack of value in demand in energy efficiency. Trust. And trust, to me, manifests in two key ways. One is trust in technology, and the other is trust in the trades, the people who are actually going to provide you with energy efficiency services and technologies. So not just the technologies themselves, but also the advice. One big problem with energy efficiency measures that might be installed in people's homes is that people are aware that the benefits of them are pretty much invisible. You can't see insulation working, you can't see the amount of energy that it is saving you. Very often, if you were able to look at your energy bills and compare and contrast with before and after, it's muddied away with other things such as the price fluctuating of the unit rates, also the weather that we might have been experiencing over time. It's really difficult to isolate the specific benefit that is being brought about by the energy efficiency measures that have been installed. When you look at generation technologies, new technology can be really intimidating. Heat pumps. I had a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of days ago where he said, what's a good new low carbon way of heating my home? I sort of said, "Oh, heat pumps are pretty cool." And he said, "What is that, geothermal energy?" And I said, "No, if you look at air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, they're a very different thing. Effectively, it was working on a fridge in reverse, and it's able to suck sort of heat out of even pretty cool air or cool ground and heat home and hot water with it, but it does it at a lower ambient background temperature." And I got into sort of far too many details about it, and his eyes glazed over a bit. Point is that heat pumps don't make a lot of sense to people, and people aren't generally aware of what they are and what they do. And when you do explain it, it doesn't really compute. And people then start to think, well, I'm going to have to change my lifestyle, I might have to change the way that I live in my home, and I might be able to turn up the heat pretty quickly if I need to, and that sort of thing can put people off. And it comes back to that point that I made about people making changes to their heating system. More often than not, it's a distress situation. They don't want to be thinking about doing something potentially scary, new, risky there. The other issue is the trust in the trades. So quite often people find that the people who are trying to promote, I was going to say flog, people who are trying to promote energy efficiency measures are people that they might not trust. So faceless corporations advising them that their heat pump is the best thing since sliced bread, or just hard salesmen door knocking and trying to sell them solar panels or try and rent a roof, things like that. There was a really great program on the BBC a couple of years ago called The Call Centre, which looked at a call centre in Swansea which was about trying to sell solar panels to people through this rent a roof scheme that the feed-in tariff promoted. And the people there really didn't know about the measures at all. All they cared about were their sales targets, and quite often that's what people understood when you spoke to them about the feed-in tariff. They said, "Oh, it's like that rent-a-roof scheme." So they didn't really understand that it was something that you could use for potentially other technologies other than solar, and you could do it yourself. The Green Deal is another case where when you look at the media that was surrounding the Green Deal, a lot of people thought that it was a cashback scheme because that's what made a lot of the national press, that's what made a lot of the radio adverts. And hearing British Gas offering this Green Deal cashback on the new boiler, I don't remember seeing any real national media which accurately portrayed what the Green Deal was and how it potentially benefit people. So that's kind of the sales side of things. On the other side, you've got these sort of cowboy builders, the sort of dodgy geezers who might be trying to rip people off that people are worried about. And very often they are comfortable going to a local builder who they trust or who they've used before for other projects, but quite often that builder might not be able to do the energy efficiency works. So they're more likely to go for a local tradesperson that they trust rather than risk potentially coming into contact with the bellboys of the world. People that people really trust, as it turns out, consistently in surveys and interviews, are their friends, their family, their neighbours, people that they relate to. People are much more likely to accept recommendations on what to do to their home from their friendship networks, their social trust networks. It doesn't necessarily have to be people that are immediately close to them, they are the top people. And the people that they can relate to are much more likely to get people to trust them on this. And again, going back to that idea of people that they've worked with before, they've built up a rapport with working with builders, and quite often when you ask people who have done energy efficiency works why they did it or how they found the person, they'll say, "Oh, a friend of mine put them in touch with me," or "I know them from down the pub," or something like that. You're more likely to get these local people who people trust doing the work because they are people that are recommended to them by local friends. So really, when it comes down to a lack of trust, what this leads people to do is to revert to the safest possible options that they can go for. They can go for replacing like for like. They're less likely to want to invest in something that they don't feel particularly comfortable with, that they don't have a lot of information about, that they're getting confusing information about, and where it might mean that they come into contact with a tradesperson that they somehow mistrust. So, summarising these issues that we talked about, the reasons that I think that we've got a problem with lack of demand in the UK for energy efficiency. The first thing is this lack of value. A lack of value inherently of energy saving improvements perceived by people, but also just a lack of awareness and a lack of value in any kind of other benefits that people might find from these improvements made to their home. Secondly, there's a lack of understanding of suitable improvements, awareness, you could also say, suitable improvements, and by suitable improvements we're talking about ones that actually are definitely going to work for their home. And lack of understanding around the existing system. So the thing that people will say, I'm not going to invest in something new, something potentially disruptive, when I think that, when I've got this vague recollection, this vague notion that I could be getting more out of what I've currently got. And that does make sense. Thirdly, lack of trust, and as we discussed, lack of trust in new technologies and technologies that people aren't familiar with, lack of trust that it might be installed correctly because you can't immediately see the benefits, you can't tell that it is working properly, you can't tell necessarily that it's giving you the savings that you might be advertised. And built in with that is the lack of trust of the industry as well. Just one other point on lack of trust, there's been lots of research done into energy performance gap, something which I know CE and the Energy Institute here are doing a lot of work on. A lot of that can be down to comfort taking and various other reasons as to why buildings don't necessarily perform in the way that they are advertised. And when that gets back to other people and they say, I'm not getting the savings that I was advertised, or I'm not getting the benefits that I was advertised, that has a potentially damaging effect on potential uptake of other people. So looking at potential solutions, again, going back to my disclaimer, these are ideas which I have. They aren't just mine, these are ideas which plenty of other people have talked about as well. It's not an exhaustive list at all either. I also say some of these solutions are things that I tried to do as part of the startup that I was a part of, but due to the small sort of scale of this, we need to be able to do it at a much greater scale in order to make the improvements that I think we need. So the first thing, I think probably the most important thing, is to start talking about energy efficiency and renewables and these low carbon technologies in terms of other benefits. We talk about them exclusively in terms of energy saving, which is most people don't really care about how much energy they use as long as they're happy and comfortable in their home, or cost savings. People do their sort of their payback and accounting mode calculations. Can get away from that and we can start talking about more emotional, more personal benefits that resonate with people. So health is a really big one. So if you've got an energy efficient home that's warmer more year round, then you are less at risk from particularly cold weather, particularly people who are elderly or vulnerable. I also know that there's been some work done that shows that people who are more likely to be at risk of pure poverty have a higher predisposition for mental health problems as well. So there's a lot that could be said about an energy efficient home as a healthy home. Comfort is another huge one. A home that's well insulated is going to have a more stable temperature. It's going to be potentially more comfortable all year round. Heat pumps, for instance, can be run in reverse. So during the summer, you can potentially use them as a heat sink and not quite as air conditioning necessarily, but to keep your house cool, which is something which, as the country is getting warmer, I noticed that it's November now and we still haven't had the first frost, which I'm gutted about because I want to get them into slow berries and some slow gin, and we'll go to the first frost for that. Still not happening, it's been the warmest November that I can remember. As the country is getting warmer, we are stuck in this situation where we are finding that the houses do get warm in the summer and we do want to cool our homes. Security, so security partly physical security from intruders by really efficient and secure doors and windows. That's one side of it, but also security from future price rises of energy. This idea that investing in your home now means that you are safer in in terms of the future. So future-proofing is another part of that. One of the people I interviewed a little while ago, their circumstances changed recently and had said that after not really caring about how much their energy bills cost, suddenly it was a massive concern for them because they were having to use so much energy and spend so much on energy. So that was something that really did worry them. And if their home was more energy efficient, if it used had a sort of energy efficient heating system that was better insulated, that would be less of a concern because their energy outgoings would be significantly lower. But also future-proofing kind of taps into this idea of the early adopter, the idea that you can be at the cutting edge of technology and that your home can somehow be using the latest gadgets. And while I don't think that we can make energy efficiency necessarily sexy, you can start talking about heat pumps and sort of the future technology comes on with that, the idea of sort of smarter controls. A lot of what you've seen recently with Nest and with Hive is this idea of bringing design into heating controls and making them sort of much more eye-catching and much more sort of a centerpiece that you can talk about at home, and can tie into that idea that we talked about with kitchens being part of your identity. So the next idea I got was promote simple self-assessment. And what we find is that people are often reluctant to pay money for someone to come around and do an assessment of their home and to tell them what needs doing, even though they say that they don't know what potential measures could be installed in their home. So if we can come up with a way of helping people make pretty decent, simple, fast self-assessments of their home in two ways. One, to optimise their current system and give them the confidence that they are using their home to the best of their ability, using their systems to the best of their ability. It might make them more likely to say, okay, well, I'm happy to install something extra, because I know that even if I was doing all this extra stuff, if I was changing my heating controls every day depending on the weather, that's something I don't want to do. It might help make that decision a little bit more. And also getting to identify appropriate improvements to say, this is your house and these are the measures that are going to give you the best bang for your buck and give you the best benefits. So not just bang for buck, also identifying through this process of self-assessment what other benefits you can potentially get. What that will then help people do is make a better informed sort of cost-benefit analysis and help them make those decisions. Next one is to change the way we design controls. So the reason I put an iPhone there is that for any of you who have bought an iPhone in the last few years, you'll know that it doesn't really come with instructions. It pretty much is designed to work out of the box. You turn it on, it walks you through some very, very quick setup procedures, and then you're expected just to know how to do it. And that's because Apple and smartphone companies in general are investing a huge amount of time in UX, so user experience design, and making sure that things are really, really intuitive and that you can just pick them up. And you do see that people who are technophobes, people who really struggle with technology in general, are able to use iPhones and things like that. I was always amazed. My sister had a little boy about 6 or 7 years ago, and one of the first things that he did when he was 18 months old was to pick up my sister's phone and just play around with it. He couldn't talk, he couldn't read, but yeah, he knew how to open Angry Birds and he knew how to play it. It's intuitive even for an 18-month-old. So why can't our heating controls be designed in the same way? Obviously there are companies that are trying to do this now, but quite often they are at a premium. What I feel we should be trying to do is making even the most budget level heating controls out there, your thermostats and timers, as intuitive as they can possibly be. If we are getting into this realm of touch screens and things like that, providing simple feedback through the heating controls will also feed into the first two solutions that I talked about. The idea that the heating controls could turn around and say, we noticed that you have this particular heating pattern, you could use it in a different way, particularly if it was tied in with your smart meter and understanding the consumption, tied in with weather, and integrated like that, real sort of smart controls that would tell people how to potentially improve their heating regime, and also feasibly tell them what measures they could potentially install and give them don't keep better estimates of the savings that they could make. Next one is to promote success stories from relatable people. And this was during my time running my startup, Homely. We went and interviewed people who had installed various measures that people aren't really installed, so not just loft and cavity. We talked to people who have heat pumps, people who've installed quite a lot of solid wall insulation. This guy's Martin, this is dog Ben. They live in a house with a heat pump and solid wall insulation all the way around it. Martin is the most enthusiastic person about solid wall insulation I've ever met, and really wants to share his story. He's apart from being obsessed with solid wall insulation, he's actually a really nice, normal guy, and we wanted to try, through our business, to share people like Martin's story, to say that this isn't something that's completely unachievable. This isn't something which only these weird greenies are doing. These are normal people who are installing solid wall insulation and are actually really reaping the benefits and enjoying the benefits that aren't just about money, enjoying the benefits that to do with comfort and all these sorts of things as well. So if we can't get people who are friends of friends and friends to use those, at least what we can try and do is promote success stories of people that people relate to. And finally, I think we should really be working to support change in the industry. That's a character from Wreck-It Ralph, is Mr. Fix-It, and sort of this ideal kind of fix-it guy, this ideal happy tradesman. As I said before, people really want to use local trades, small trades, rather than these big corporations to do their energy efficiency work. So we need to build a platform for local growth, to support them to engage with customers, particularly on energy efficiency, and also to develop the skills needed to install this stuff. Effective regulation and certification can be really important as well, to make sure, particularly when it's well enforced, to ensure that people trust that people can't get away with being a cowboy builder. They can install stuff in a safe and effective way, and that they know they're not going to get ripped off. I think it's worked quite well in terms of the MCS micro-generation certification scheme, but I think if we could try and do more within the field of retrofit, that would help boost people's trust. And finally, promoting better customer service could be a really strong way to improve people's trust in the trades. I had a conversation with a guy who runs a green retrofit company about a year ago now, and he pointed out to me that he just moved into a house and had lots of surveyors around, things like that. But his best mate, who lived down the road, had come round and hadn't gone anywhere near the rooms and had the kind of access to the rest of the house that he had provided to the surveyor and to the tradespeople. And what we quite often forget, and what I think a lot of tradespeople often forget, is that when they're going into people's homes, they are going into fairly private spaces. These are personal spaces, and if people, if the trades are able to respect that more and make sure that customers feel comfortable letting them into their home, then that can really boost the customer's experience. As we know, when people have really good customer experiences, they're more likely to share them with their friends and say, I had this really good experience, I didn't use them again, and that can be something that can snowball and result, hopefully, in more people using really good tradespeople. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. I think we're just about on time, 45 minutes, but we've now got some time for some questions and answers. I've got my contact details there if you'd like to contact me for this or for any other bits and pieces. Like I say, I'm a freelancer, so always looking for more bits of work. Even on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter, although I'm very used to it. But yeah, thank you very much. So, any questions? Bye.
Super. Hi, Michelle Schubert. I think we've met on
Yes.
a couple of meetings. And as a lecturer in energy and social sciences, I'm absolutely thrilled to pieces to see the sort of things that you're covering here in terms of the importance of us in the energy community working out other ways to sell energy efficiency and tapping into the sorts of things that people are already concerned about, rather than trying to convert everyone to outputs. So I'm absolutely thrilled to see that. Then the other bit is just kind of a genuine question in terms of sort of more recent work on this. Many years ago, I've dug out and I've waved under lots of people's noses over the years that a BRE report from a number of years ago where they actually looked at the actual energy consumption of different dwellings that had also had a SAP rating. And it was a very alarming graph for me when I saw it. And that, of course, as you might actually expect, the dwellings that have the lowest SAP rating, i.e. they are the least energy efficient, also use the least amount of energy. And those that have the medium SAP rating use a lot of energy. And there's only a slight tail off once we get to the highest level of energy efficiency. So I don't know of any more recent work that breaks that down to sort of, because I'm slightly concerned when we talk about all sorts of energy efficiency programs, that if we promote, for instance, on the basis of comfort or health, all sorts of things, people moving from the worst energy efficient homes to merely the middle, that actually we're likely to see energy consumption shoot up in those homes. And I don't know if you or other people, so we're trying to chase whether there's more recent work, others might know of more recent work that actually does that disaggregation to say what's the actual fuel consumption, the different SAP ratings.
I'm not aware of any other work that's really been done into it. I mean, the DECC high-low study that was done a little while ago
that didn't really, because they didn't actually do actual SAP ratings.
I think you're right.
Small. If anyone's aware, do talk to me afterwards.
Yeah, me too. I'd be really interested to know. Back in my housing days, I remember I gave a talk at a conference about Peabody's housing stock and talked about how actually when you talk to people who are really genuinely fuel poor, they are often the people who are most aware of their energy usage, and they are the experts in energy conservation. They know how to use the least possible energy to get what they need, which totally resonates with the idea that people who are kind of in the
atrocious homes using the least.
Which worries me in some ways when we try to target energy efficiency schemes at the F and G rated homes. I mean, yes, objectively it would be good to improve the least efficient homes, but that's not necessarily going to give us the best in terms of our carbon savings and our energy savings that we need to do. Which is why we really do need to be focusing on that middle ground and moving them up into the A's and B's or whatever replaces EPCs if what we do. I was talking to Taj about DECC, which again was a Peabody development, super low carbon homes, which were getting EPCs at sort of C ratings, and it's because the surveyors used the method and wouldn't necessarily know that the walls were thicker, wouldn't necessarily have noticed that you had triple glazed windows, see that they don't have a heating control system, so they get marked down for that as well. So because of the way that the IEDE SAP process is used in EPCs, it means that you don't necessarily get a proper representation of how energy efficient the building might be. So I think there are a lot of things that need to be done there. Which magazine also did a survey recently where they looked, I say recently, a couple of years ago now, where they looked at different providers of EPCs and they got them to do the same homes, and you ended up with wildly different SAP ratings because human error is involved, and all of these companies are trying to drive the cost down of EPCs and make them as cheap as they possibly can. And somewhere along the way, you do lose some of the sort of precision and the skill that comes in making a really good, accurate assessment of these dwellings. One of the things, again, that Taj was talking about is, I think many of you may be aware that the UK is going to have smart meters installed in every home by 2020. I don't know how we're doing on that at the moment, but hopefully it's some way on to being done. And with that sort of information, hopefully that will give us a way of also finding a way of assessing how energy efficient the building is, along with potentially other sort of monitoring system. But yeah, I would really like to see more research done in this particular area and in understanding that we need to do to focus on these middle sort of separated homes, but the ones that use the most, and how that, whether that's because of people's apathy, I guess, in terms of energy usage. And quite often, when people can afford to heat their home to any kind of urban need heating on the day, then it doesn't really bother them. I mean, I did do lots of interviews with people who said things like, it costs what it costs to heat my home. So the idea that just increasing energy costs could make some people suddenly go, right, I'm going to change my heating system, or I'm going to install energy efficiency, isn't necessarily going to fly, because people are happy if they can still do it.
It's the same thing with food. I mean, say for instance, food costs are going up and up or whatever. It's not like people are all of a sudden going to decide that they need to throw out all of their cooking pans and utensils and whatever and start a completely new set.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense that people don't necessarily pay attention to efficiency.
Thank you for an interesting talk. I have a question. So the main argument is that there is a lack of demand among people, which I completely agree with. But and you gave an example of constraints and barriers. And but clearly there are people who actually did go minor amount of people, but they did go and do those renovations.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to ask those people what actually drove them to
Yeah.
maybe run from their initial drivers?
So the startup that I created, the Homely, we actually used various networks that are already out there. There's the Old Home Super Homes network that you might be familiar with, that is a really good resource of people who have done sort of big investments in their home to improve energy efficiency. So Martin's actually on that list, the guy whose picture I showed, and these people do want to share their experience, because generally, even if they really struggled with the work and installations, they are happy that they did it. There's very few people who I've come across who have gone to the effort themselves of improving their home in terms of energy efficiency and then come away going, I wish I'd never done it. Where you do see that happen is in rented accommodation, where people feel that it's done to them, and quite often if people do it and don't get a good handover experience to the tenants, and they suddenly sort of left with a heat pump they never really ask for and they don't know how to use. But yes, I did interview a number of people there. Also on the ETI projects that I've worked on, both of them, we did talk to people who have installed sort of some of the higher level stuff. But I can't talk too much about that because that's part of their work and their IP. But you are from UCL, so by all means have a chat with Rakaya, because I'm sure you'll be able to get the reports.
But any places like differences
Between
drivers between people who went through that route and a lot of people who don't have a driver to go.
So the things that really struck me, jumped out when I looked at who these people were and what they were like, is that invariably they were older, so over the age of 40, 50, quite often kids at that time, and very often educated to degree level or older, degree level or further. So a lot of PhD, doctors, very often engineers, very often people who have some sort of career experience in the field, be they architects, like they are engineers, and more often than not they'd be the sorts of people who really wanted to project manage the entire retrofit, particularly for the more complicated ones. So they required multiple different measures. And the thing that always kind of bothered me about that is that that's not normal. People don't expect to have to really devote a whole amount of time to doing lots of research, in terms of who to get, in terms of the different measures, and actually every step of the way you be telling the builders what to do. A a lot of people just want to say, I want this done, you do the work, and don't mess it up. So those were the things that really struck me about it. And quite often they were people who have a green sort of passion. Like they do believe in tackling climate change, they do believe in sort of addressing environmental concerns. And so, yeah, they are atypical, not particularly, I don't want to say normal, but you know what I mean. Okay.
Yeah, hi. So you've done the startup thing, and assuming the government is not coming to save us in the next 3 or more years, and you've left it to the business sector, having had your experience, and knowing all of that, there's a really good synthesis, by the way, what would you create to create scale?
The scale thing is the thing that always stumps me, because what we created with the business, I still think is something that could work. It was, the business model, the way it would make money was on lead generation. So we marketed ourselves as people who knew the language of the customer, but also knew the language of the businesses, and knew the language of energy efficiency. And what we would do is we would connect customers with businesses and take a small commission for that introduction. And that kind of finder's fee approach is used by a lot of different organisations that are already out there, things like Trusted Trader or moneysupermarket.com, those kind of places that refer you on to different businesses. That's not necessarily going to be the silver bullet. I don't think there is really a silver bullet. The 5 solutions I put up at the end, by themselves aren't necessarily going to work. And even if we implement all 5 of those, again, I don't think too many things. I think it's clear that we can't rely on governments to really push all of that. I had a conversation with DECC last year about this, and they said something to me that really resonated, which was that they don't see government as creators of markets. They don't think the government should be really forcing the market in a particular direction. What they should be doing is just facilitating kind of existing directions of things. So really, in some ways, we do have to rely on private sector organisations to do this. But I was also having a chat with Taj before this talk, and an energy company who shall remain nameless was promoting their new scenarios a few years back, and I went to the launch, and the chairman was presenting about it and talked about 2 different scenarios that they imagine the future of energy looking like from 2050. One was really dependent on hydrocarbons, lots of oil, lots of gas, lots of coal. The other one was really dependent on lots of hydrocarbons, lots of oil, lots of gas, lots of coal, and a bit of solar thrown in as well. And those were 2 radically different worlds they imagined the future to look like. And when somebody said to them, well, what does this mean in terms of climate change? What does this mean in terms of dealing with that pressing problem? The guy said something which I think was really honest, and I really respect him for saying it, which is that they're a business and they have an obligation to their shareholders to deliver the maximum amount of profit that they possibly can. And at the moment, the best way they can do that is through delivering on their core business, and their shareholders, he said, would not thank them for doing anything necessarily just philanthropic. So that's, for me, part of the problem in trying to rely on these big corporations that are focused on hydrocarbons or focused on the status quo to try and do something, is that they are protecting their business interests. So we can't necessarily rely on them. It's going to require new businesses, or it's going to require new value streams, I think. Hey.
Just following up, Tom from NEF, do you have any ideas of what those value streams look like, or what those kind of new businesses look like?
I think we're already starting to see renewable tech really taking off. I mean, solar, I think they said recently has reached grid parity in certain places. I don't know if that's just in the UK, if that's in the UK or if it's in America or wherever. So in some ways, it's a matter of time until that dips sort of below the price of doing things as per normal, using hydrocarbons, things like that, until there is a really, really strong monetary reason to invest in this stuff. That is something which I think will happen. And looking at future trends, innovations like electric cars, I mean, that died a death when people first started trying to do electric cars way back in the 80s, stuff like that. But now, with improved battery tech and graphene being this new super material that might potentially be used as a sort of a battery to charge up really fast, store a lot of energy, we are looking at cars which can travel much further distances and be charged up really quickly, or potentially replace the entire battery because it's maybe a bit smaller. So there are lots of innovations which are coming forward, which I think are going to lead us in the right direction. The ones that do still concern me are home heating related ones, because heat pumps I think are fantastic, but they don't work in the same way that people are currently used to. So for a lot of these technologies to take off, we are going to have a cultural shift in terms of the way we think about heating our homes, so that we are happy with sort of an ambient temperature that's maintained pretty much all day round. So I think there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done in terms of marketing this. Actually, marketing is not really the right word. It's promoting these benefits, like I talked about. It's saying to people that you can get more from these investments and improvements than just savings on your energy bills, or for sort of feeling good about yourself because you've done something for the planet.
Do you think there's something in there with the control side, whether you can trick the consumer into thinking so they can still control it exactly the same how they would typically, but the technology can do a totally different thing. So what they're seeing gives them the effect that they desire. They control it in a way that is intuitive to them, but behind the scenes something totally different is going on.
Is that a very good strategy to be tricking consumers with the technologies in their homes?
That's
in terms of the trust issues that Seb reportedly raised.
I think that's my concern, because a tabloid newspaper, which I wouldn't dare to name any particular one, might get hold of the story and suddenly, it's like the VW emissions scandal. Suddenly it's so huge. And
okay, let me rephrase my question then. So I get that. So, and there is an importance. You need to have the machine being trusted by humans. There's ways you can tier the information that you give to the user.
That is something which I actually do think smart controls should do, because I've done some work in looking at different types of smart heating controls, and quite often you're left to choose between something which is too simple and it's a bit opaque to people, so the feedback that they get doesn't make any sense. I mean, you see it on boilers that have an eco button, or TVs that have eco buttons on. What does that do? People don't really understand. It's opaque what that does. If you can make it more transparent and give people tiered information, I think you're absolutely onto a winner, so that people can deal with the really basic setup and can deal with just a one-touch button. But if they want to go into it more, then they have that ability to find out a bit more. One thing that I actually didn't mention, which I think could really tie into that idea of learning from smartphones in terms of heating controls, is people are tied to the controls very often that are installed with the boilers and with the systems that are installed in the first place. What they don't have is the ability to do what I can do with my phone, which is, if I don't have a keyboard on there, I can download one that works better, or I can download a different browser, or I can download different software. It's the same bit of kit, but my sort of experience of my phone is unique to me and unique to the way that I want to customize it and use it. If we had a platform that was effectively like a smartphone or a touchscreen on the wall, and you had like a heating app store or a home automation app store, that if your heating controls were tied in with other things, and you could give you more information, you could have a greater degree of control, you could tie in with weather, your local area and things like that. That sort of thing could also be something that could work really well. But again, it's who's going to manufacture that and how do they make money out of it. And again, you can probably learn from Apple and the App Store on that, because Apple make all of their money from the App Store pretty much. think someone said that Apple could afford to give away an iPhone to everybody because the amount of money they make on the App Store and the amount of money they sort of get through repeat customers just pretty much pays for the cost of those phones in the first place. That's why when my wife has dropped her phone on more than one occasion and shattered the screen, she's been able to go to the App Store and get a completely free replacement despite being out of warranty. They will very often replace your phone. That's a life hack for anyone.
I guess that comes to the issue of scalability, isn't it? That's what you need to look at. Sorry.
So I was just saying, in terms of the countries that have had more success in reducing bans, obviously we've got the older stock issues and maybe the colder climate sort of force.
Yeah.
But what do you think we could learn from those countries that are doing better?
I was talking to you about this before the talk, and I don't really have a really good answer on that. I think a lot of it is cultural. I think a lot of it is down to what people are used to in terms of the way they interact with their home, or in terms of what they come to expect from government schemes and things like that. If you compare the Green Deal to the scheme in Germany with the card built with a bank and loads of people, the schemes are different. The take-up in Germany has been significantly better. It was supported by other schemes as well, but I think you do just generally have different cultural ideas about government involvement in these schemes. And I think what they mentioned about the schemes that have been used to date, we have shot ourselves in the foot a bit by devaluing these things, by saying, you have to pay for these, because why would you? So, yeah, I think there's a lot of different reasons, and I'd be really interested to know if anybody else has any particular opinions about why different countries are getting it right or getting it wrong. Any other questions?
I wonder if we might take this upstairs in a glass of wine and some with us. You can join me in thanking Sebs.